Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam Smith, and today we dive back into Primal: The Awakening from Reggie Games. But this time around, unlike my recently released showcase focusing on how to play and how to set up, which I'll put a link to in the top right hand corner if you're new to Primal: The Awakening, but the purpose of this video is to show you some of that expansion content in action. So I picked a monster from the Feathers expansion, and I've got two characters here which are not included in the base game. These come from the Mount Havoc expansion. The expansion monster I've chosen to go up against today is Pazis, and this individual has 3 behavior cards placed on its dashboard to start, and along with a whole bunch of other ones coming in the near future. We have our stance card here for stance number 1, and we have stance 2 and 3 underneath for now. Then over here we have the peril card, this one again for stance 1. There will be eventually other cards that will come in per other game effects and other stance transitions. So when we transition from stance 1 to 2, then we're going to have another card over here which will come in and cause some fun, but for now we'll place those cards off to the side. Now, something else specific for Pazis is the fact that it has paralyzing spores. These cards are specific to the actual characters you've selected, so make sure that you have 4 of each of these with the card backs that match the character you're using. Those paralyzing spore cards can sit off to the side for now until we need to use them as part of gameplay. We also have the attrition deck up here shuffled and ready to go. And up top we have 10 total health for this monster, and our aim overall is to take this monster from 10 health down to 0 to give us a victory. Now, just before we go ahead and talk about the 2 expansion characters I've chosen to use coming from the Mount Havoc expansion, I need to make this mention. If you have not seen any of my Primal: The Awakening content to date, definitely recommend you check out the game showcase first, especially if you do not know how to play this game yet, because that showcase will take you through things at a slower pace, and I explain every step along the way to help you get the flow of the game down. Whereas with this, we'll go through that flow, of course, but we'll be going through a bit quicker. One of the characters from the Mount Havoc expansion is Heleren. She's got a heavy gun here, and as I talked about earlier, this is all set up for level 1. It's a pre-constructed loadout for her, and as you know, you can customize things to your liking when doing expedition mode. You can also level to whatever level you'd like to start at based on those pre-constructed levels. And of course, you can dive into campaign play where you start from scratch essentially and work your way up and really build your character, and I think that's where the meat of the game really is found. However, for the purposes of this video, it makes a lot more sense to focus on the expedition mode as a one-shot scenario. So we got ourselves here an ocean gun, a thunder helm, an iron plate, an electric dagger, and a number of other potions down below. Now, each of these characters coming from the expansion has definitely one major thing that is different than all the other characters. They're all unique, especially when it comes to their cards and how they operate. But this thing right here, this track, we're going to talk about it. This is known as a bullet track. It's a special resource just for this character. Now, when you set up the game, you place the bullet marker on the 3rd space to indicate she has 3 bullets. Some of her card abilities that you will see throughout the game are going to require you to spend bullets in order to trigger special effects. Whenever you spend a bullet or you gain any through card abilities, you have to move the marker, of course, so you can keep track of how many bullets you still have available. And as we get further into gameplay, you'll see how that ties into the cards that she has and how she can use these bullets to her advantage. The second character coming on the expedition is Karah, and this is a dual blade character. She has Volt Rage, she has an electric dagger, so she has the same dagger as the other character we have, plus they have the same potion here. So these two are exactly the same between characters based on their level 1 loadouts inside of the rulebook, but these are different and these are all different, and of course their cards specific to them are also different. Now, the actual dashboard has a difference in terms of what makes her special, and it's known as Battle Dance. And when you play cards in your sequence that are either red or blue consecutively, and they have to be red or blue because they have to match a symbol you can see there on the dashboard in the black icon, as long as you're playing those cards in sequence, once you get to the 2nd position, 4th position, and 6th position of consecutive cards of that type, you're going to start getting additional free damage to throw at the monster. So our aim is to use both of these expansion characters to try and take down this expansion monster by getting its health from 10 down to 0. Now, how do we lose this scenario? Well, if we have no more characters standing, in other words, all players are KO'd, we have failed this expedition. And also we can fail if the round counter there on the right-hand side of the game board ever gets to the end of round 10. Then we've run out of time and we've failed. Now, there's also an additional condition with this specific monster where it can actually flee. We haven't got to it just yet, but we will as we get into gameplay. Last but not least, let's quickly talk about the layout of the game board here. Now, it is worth mentioning I need to make one correction, and that is to switch where the 2 plants are currently sitting. With that corrected, you might be wondering why I'm using tokens as well as miniatures. And that's because the game, of course, includes tokens for everything, whether you're grabbing expansion or the core box, but it has a separate terrain pack you can pick up to kind of enhance the visual look and feel of the game. If you do so, definitely recommend you do a little shade painting in order to kind of make that pop a little bit more, or you can just place tokens nearby to remind yourself what each of these plants or different wildlife do. So actually, let's go over all 4 of the different sectors so you know exactly what benefits we can get from them or potentially what things could hurt us. This one right here allows us to go ahead and suffer a damage per weapon level to draw cards. If we really want to push for additional cards, we can do this at the start of our turn. The one to the north, way up north, at the start of the turn, you can heal 1 damage per weapon level. So a nice place to be when you're badly wounded. On the left-hand side, we have some green brush. At the start of your movement phase, if no hunters in the brush, you can recycle a dodge card, which is one of the green cards, to hide in the brush. You place your miniature on the brush terrain, you pause your turn, and play passes to the next player. So essentially, you are out of play. You can't be hurt. You can hide in there. So tactically, it's very, very beneficial. While hidden, though, you can't assist or taunt, though. The kicker with using this advantage is that the individual that's hiding in the brush has to name a player, or if you're playing solo, name a character who has not taken a turn this round, and then that character goes ahead, takes a turn, and then it comes back to the individual that is hiding in the brush, and they come out of the brush and resume their turn. The green brush comes from the core box. The red brush is actually known as jungle brush, and that comes from the feather expansion. And the difference with this one is that it's actually triggered. In other words, you can hide inside the brush by using an aggro card instead of a defensive card. The advantages of the brush are still the same as the green one, and it is worth mentioning that you can only ever have 1 person hiding inside of the brush at a time. We're now ready to head into our very first round of play, so we'll make sure that the marker is on round number 1. One of the final steps to set up is to choose one of your characters to have the aggro token to start the game, which is this one right here. I'm choosing to place it on Heleren. We now check for any starter round effects, and we do have one right on the stance card itself. It says at the start of the round, each player suffers a damage unless they reveal one of the yellow icon cards from their hand. That's a pretty nasty effect right at the gates, and unfortunately Heleren does not have a yellow card to reveal, so she does take a single point of damage right from the beginning, whereas over here with Karah, we do have 1 yellow to show and reveal, so because of that, no damage. At this point, if I was really worked up about the fact I have damage on Heleren, I could choose to consume a potion with her in order to get rid of it, but it's not a real good use of one. I have one here that can heal 2, and even up to 4 if I play it in the right way, tied to the attrition deck. We'll talk more about that later on for those that have not seen that potion in the past, although it's pretty common. And on the other side of the equation, no consumption of a potion needed, so we'll skip right past that. The next step is a behavior refresh, but we are in the very first round, so we're skipping right past that. But typically you take a look at the 3 cards on the dashboard for the monster, and you discard the lowest numbered card. So in this case, if we were doing one, we'd be discarding this one and replacing it with whatever's on top here. But as it's the first round, we're skipping right past that, but you'll see it later on. Now, before we move on, the behavior cards which are sitting in these slots on the dashboard for the monster are very important to keep an eye on because they will trigger and interrupt things going on during gameplay based on the icon. So the icon there on the far right says at the start of a player's turn, if there is at least 1 player in a flank sector, in other words, on the sides of the monster, then that is going to have that card trigger. In other words, it's going to flip upwards. Now, what's even nastier is this icon right here is a reactionary behavior card. So essentially when another behavior card is triggered, this one triggers also, which can be really bad if you have a few of those in the row because you can have multiple triggers going on and things can really get wild. Now this one over here is tied to the threatened token. The first individual that gets a threatened token, in this case placed on their character dashboard, would have that behavior card flipped over. And to the left, there's a pile of more behavior cards that will come out over time with different icons and different triggering effects. Next, the monster's going to gain struggle tokens, 1 per player, so in my case, 2 struggle tokens. So what are struggle tokens all about? Well, they're not good. If the monster continues to accumulate them over time, if it has 3 struggle tokens per player, so in my case with 2 characters, that would be a total of 6. Once it hits that 6 threshold of struggle tokens, it's going to unleash. And when that happens, 2 things are going to happen. The first is all players immediately suffer the damage value on the stance card in the bottom right-hand corner. So in this case, for stance 1, it's just 1 damage each, which isn't all that bad, but could increase as you go through the stances of the monster. monster, which you will if you're actually progressing in a positive manner, but you do not want to see these struggle tokens accumulating because it's going to trigger this over and over again. The next thing you do, once you trigger it, is you're going to remove the struggle tokens until the monster only has 1 per player. So even if it gets up to 6, you're removing it down till there's 2 left. So it's just going to continue to build these up round on round and use this unleash against you. You can mitigate this using game effects and cards and other things in order to try to keep that at bay. But if you don't, it's going to nick at you every once in a while. The monster can also use struggle tokens to boost their behavior cards. So when you actually see a behavior card in the future, there might be one where it can use struggle tokens, discarding them in order to make things even nastier for you. We're now ready for player turns. Based on whoever has the aggro token from setup, they're going to now gain the first player marker. Start of turn effects for Heleren. The one major one is in the sector she's currently in. This one right here for that plant tells us that we can actually take a damage to draw another card. I'm going to choose not to, mainly because we got a free damage thanks to the start of round effects from the monster, and I'd rather not go up to 2 damage right off the hop. Movement phase for Heleren is up next. We have to decide, do we want to stay put or do we want to move to an adjacent sector? Now, if we stay put, we have to take a threatened token. And as I talked about earlier, if we have a token placed on one of our characters, it's going to immediately trigger this behavior card from the monster up here, which we do not want to do. You don't want to be doing things that are going to speed up how much pain and suffering is coming towards you from the monster. So let's get her on the move. When you choose to move, you have to use stamina. Stamina is found right on the cards that you have in hand. I've got stamina. If I discard any of these cards, I get that number of stamina, and any excess gets lost. I only need 1 stamina to move, but you have to make these decisions wisely because then it's going to affect what you have in your hand afterwards. You can also get stamina tokens you can actually spend in order to do the movement to keep the cards in hand instead. This is the card I'm going to discard from my hand in order to get the stamina I need to make a move. And it's worth noting you can only move once during the movement phase. It's now time for the actions phase for Heleren, and how does it work? Well, you can take a series of actions by playing cards into your sequence, moving left to right, building out a sequence that hopefully is going to provide you some attacks against the monster. That'll be the red cards when they go into your sequence. You can potentially use blue cards, which I currently don't have any in my hands at the moment, but if you use one, not only do they help you with maneuvering, they will also allow you to remove a struggle token as well. Again, they correspond in colors. When you place a blue one down, remember to remove 1 struggle token from the pile so it can help to mitigate the nastiness we talked about earlier. Now, the yellow and green cards are the dodge cards, or defensive-minded cards. The idea behind them is the more of them you have in your sequence going left to right, when it gets to the point of the attrition check for the boss, which is essentially the boss's way of attacking you generically, you might have enough defense to basically not take any damage whatsoever. If you don't focus on defense, then that attrition check and that hit against you will be a little more nasty. And that's just a general high-level idea as to what you can do during your actions phase. Now, we're going to go ahead and start building in a sequence, but this is going to be one of the simplest sequences ever, as I'm planning to just use 1 card. I'm going to use this card here called Cannonball. In order to play this red attack card, Cannonball, I have to spend 4 stamina, and I cannot use the stamina on the card itself to pay for it. I have to use it from elsewhere. It could be from tokens, could be from an assist from another character, for instance, or most usually it comes from cards in your own hand. So I have stamina in there, and unfortunately I have only 4, which I could turf all 3 of my cards I have left in hand in order to pay the stamina cost for Cannonball, and I'm going to go ahead and do that because I think it might be the right time to pull this off. It says here you may spend 3 bullets, which is great because she actually has 3 from the very start of the game. And if I spend the 3 bullets, then I get to stun the monster, which I'll talk about that in a second because that's a great benefit, and I get to increase the damage the attack does by 4. And another player can generate stamina to help me pay for this cost of the card if I wanted to, but I chose not to. So to make this Cannonball attack as best as it can be, we're going to use all 3 of our bullets. Now, the stun condition is awesome strategically, especially when you know something's going to trigger behaviorally in the future. So getting a stun token allows you to place it on any one of the behavior cards on the dashboard, and the one I know is going to trigger at the start of the next turn for Heleren is the fact she's in a flank position for the monster, at least as of right now. Of course, that monster can turn and move around, but I think that's the one that's going to trigger probably quicker than the other one, which is the one around not moving and getting a threatened token. This one's not going to do anything until one of these other 2 do. So I think it's safe to put the stun on this one. Heleren is not messing around. Her Ocean Gun level 1 gives 4 damage already, and then the 4 damage boost over here is a total of 8. So the damage would normally go in token form right on the stance card. So I place 8 damage tokens right on here, but there's no point because the toughness of this monster is a 4 times the number of characters, which is 2. So that means the toughness is 8. In other words, once I get 8 damage on this card, which I literally just did, then I get to go ahead and inflict a wound. By going all out with a cannonball and using all of our bullets, we got ourselves a full wound, which is awesome. Now, typically you might get a smaller amount of damage. Maybe you only get 4 if we hadn't souped up the cannonball and we just placed the 4 damage on here. And once we get another 4, then it would allow us to convert it to a wound. So think of damage as basically being piled up on this card until it reached the threshold of the toughness, which then gets converted into a wound, and you work those wounds down to 0. Now, I'm not sure if I already mentioned this earlier or not, but it's important to note that the attack card I use does show the aggro token on it with the red on the inside. That means the aggro token will move to the individual character that did the attack. Now, in this case, I already have the aggro, so nothing's happening, but essentially, thematically, certain attack cards you place down are going to be worse than others and more obvious, so the boss is going to focus its attention and its anger towards you, whereas some other attacks will be a little more silent and strategic, and you can get away with them without actually taking the aggro token. Now, Primal the Awakening has many different cards with many different abilities, so make sure you become familiar with all of them because you might miss some benefits. Like this one right here, Thunder Helm. It says when you discard a red attack card from your hand to generate stamina, you get to deal a damage. And I toss 2 red attack cards as well as a green dodge card, so I get 1 damage for each of the red cards I discarded for stamina, and they get placed on the stance card. We're working our way back up to 8. Now, there's also one other ability that I'm not choosing to take advantage of, but I want to talk about. It's a new keyword for the Feather expansion for this particular ocean gun. It's called Ignite. So basically what this refers to is anytime this character spends bullets, this is going to trigger. So Recycle 1 triggers, which allows me to take a card that I have in hand and recycle it to draw a new card. In other words, discarding it to draw a different one, hoping for something better. But I burned all the cards I had in my hand, so I cannot do that. Now, just taking a few steps back to when I place the stun marker on this behavior card, there's another step that happens when a stun occurs, which is pretty awesome. You choose another player, and that player can reveal up to 2 red attack cards from their hand, and for every red card they do in this way, you get to do their weapon damage against the enemy. So an amazing time to do this, as there are 2 red cards inside of Karah's hand, so she goes ahead and makes some attacks by just showing that she has 2 red attack cards in hand, and she gets to do the damage of her weapon twice, so 3 times 2 is 6 more damage. So that 6 damage is going to bump up the 2 I already have to a total of 8, allowing us to do another wound to the monster. I can't complain about that start. We got 2 wounds off the hop with Heleren, a massive turn. I don't want to do anything else for my actions phase for her. Now, at this point, at the end of your actions phase, if you have 2 or more cards left in your hand, you get to gain a stamina token, which again, as I mentioned before, is another way you can pay for movement in the future, or potentially even discount the cost of a card you want to play into your sequence. We now move into the attrition phase, which is a simple check to see whether or not the boss is going to do damage back to us. Now, during our actions phase, if I had to play it into my sequence yellow or green dodge cards, for each one I play in the sequence, that's going to allow me to gather up some value around defense. And when you pull the attrition card, you're going to compare it to that defensive value to see whether a hit is going to come through or not. So if I had a green and a yellow in my sequence, that means I would have 2 defense. And if the attrition card coming off the top was a 2 or a 1, I'd be able to defend against it. If it's a 3, well, bad things happen. Well, it looks like I called this one. I don't have any defense to put up against this attrition value, so we are taking an attack from the boss. It's always a good idea to look at your dashboard to see if you have any effects that could help you with attrition checks. Like this one, for instance, the Iron Plate, revealing the first attrition card. If you don't like it, you can pay a stamina to discard it and draw another one, hoping for a better result. In this case, for me, having no defense value to even go up against the attrition, probably not a good time to do it. And I don't have any stamina anyway. Now down here, when you avoid attrition, this is more so talking about a situation where you do have defensive cards in your sequence that do block the attrition value, then you can take advantage of this. The damage from this attack is simply in the bottom right-hand corner of the stance card, which is 1, so we get a nice swipe. We're now at 2 hits. And if you're wondering how much health a character has, you'll see it totaled up by these 2 areas right here, the helm and what you're wearing clothing-wise. So 4 in the bottom right and 7 gives a total of 11. We got 2 damage on us, so we have 9 more to go before we're KO'd. We now go to end of turn. We discard the sequence that we played. We only had one card in the sequence, but let's say we had 3 cards. We discard them into our discard pile based on the order played. So you'd work from right to left. In this case, it doesn't matter because there's only one card. It's going straight in there. Heleren now refills her hand. She's up to her standard hand size of 5, so you draw and discard to make sure you have just 5. And then, of course, there might be strain tokens that actually can change things as well in terms of the hand size, but nothing to worry about there. At this point, the monster is going to turn towards the aggro player. The aggro token is with Heleren, as we know, so the monster is going to turn and face her. End of turn abilities now trigger if there are any. There are not. So at this point, we go to the end of round if both characters had their turns, but Karah still hasn't gone yet. So now she's going to start her turn. Karah's started turn effects. She has a Crystal Helm and Crystal Armor, both with the start keyword. This one says, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. So let's go ahead and do that. We can't change the order of them, but we can at least take a peek and see what they are. So we have Backstab here. This is about overrunning a monster, something that's key to her. And then Run Through, you may immediately overrun the monster. So we'll put those back exactly in the same order that they were because we can just look at them. That's it. So we know what's coming down the line in terms of if we want to try to push to draw up some cards. And over here, this one says if you have 3 or more cards of the same color in your hand, you get to draw one anyway for free, which is pretty awesome. We're just one shy of a blue or a red to get that extra draw. I'm going to have her move to the rear position of the monster, so she's going to move to this sector right here. We have to get rid of 1 card worth at least 1 stamina. I'm going to choose to use this card here, discarding it for the 1 stamina to allow me to move. That allows me to avoid the threatened token, which is good, heading into the action phase now. Next, I'm going to use a card called Overture. This one here costs 1 stamina. It says if you paid with a red card, then you get to draw 3 cards. And knowing what we have at the top of the deck, good time to pull some stuff. I have a card in my hand which I like for the future, but it doesn't benefit me right now, and that's Lightning Strike. It has a really cool advantage of being able to, if you have a red card at the top of your discard pile, you can actually play that card as the next card in your sequence without paying its stamina cost. Pretty cool, but this is going to be the one that I use to discard for its stamina to pay for this, allowing me to draw 3 new cards. We got a red attack card and 2 dodge green cards. We have Backstab and Run Through we knew from before. Finesse is a new one. That's the first card in the sequence. Top right hand corner has the aggro token icon in red. So we're going to take the aggro token and place it over here. I'm going to choose to do something brand new for this expansion called the Overruns. I'm going to go ahead and play this one right here into my sequence. It's going to cost 1 stamina to do it. So I'm going to get rid of Finesse in order to pay that stamina. This says you may immediately overrun the monster. Now, 2 things I want to mention. One I missed just moments ago, and something worth noting right now. So first off, when I played this blue sequence card into my sequence, always remember blue cards allow you to take a struggle away from the monster. I've got 2 on there right now, so 1 struggle being taken away, leaving it with 1. And this is my first defensive card in my sequence, so that's going to help me with the attrition test later on. So 1 struggle token being removed, as I just mentioned, and we're going to go ahead and do an overrun. Now, as I jump to the opposite side of the monster, I have a card in my hand called Backstab. This one states right on it, when you overrun the monster, you may discard this card from your hand to deal 4 damage. So 4 damage tokens being placed on the stance area here as they work our way up to 8. We also don't want to miss this advantage for Voltrage, the weapon. When you overrun the monster, place a counter on this card. Voltrage now has +4 for each counter on it. And of course, when we play one of those red cards to attack in the future, then all the counters are removed from this card. And of course, it will be a much stronger attack. And as much as I want to push for more, I'm actually going to hold off with 2 cards left in my hand. I'm thinking about the combinations between them and think they'll be better left for a future turn rather than trying to basically use one of them and burning another when I actually like both and would like to get them both in my sequence because I can see some cool combinations between them. Plus the fact that if I hold on to this at the end of my turn here, I'm going to gain a stamina token, which is a nice little plus for the future. Also, again, a reminder for the battle dance of this character does not trigger this time because the 2 cards that I actually put in my sequence, only one of them has that symbol, and the one immediately afterwards was a different one for defense. And so because of this, it breaks the chain of them being in order in the sequence to be able to trigger the additional 3 damage. So unfortunately, I don't get that, but something to work towards or potentially pull off in the future. You can see that if you actually get yourself quite the sequence going of these cards on the attack side of the equation, or I should say the maneuver and attack side of the equation, you can get yourself some pretty nice bonus damage. Now, just caught something before my action phase ends, and that's the fact I should place a counter here on Piercing Dash my Mastery. This is when you overrun the monster, which I did, place a counter on this card. We're working our way up to 2. Once we do, we get our Mastery ready to go. What that allows us to do is look at cards in our hands like this that have the dual swords crossed. It says increase your sequence limit by 1 this turn. So basically, there will be an alternative version, or basically it powers up some of the cards you already have in your deck, making them even stronger. There's other benefits as well well, we'll see when the mastery comes into place. Moving on to the attrition test, let's see how it goes for our active player. And as of right now, we have 1 defense in our sequence. Let's see how we do for the attrition check. It's a flip of the top card, and we got ourselves a 1, which means we have successfully defended it. Only if it is above our current defense level, then it would be an attack and damage again based on the stance card. My electric dagger now gets to trigger because we avoided attrition damage. This one states, you may choose and discard a behavior card in play. If you do, replenish its behavior slot with the top card of the behavior deck. To be completely honest, I don't want to do that. The 3 that are actually in there right now are great, and the reason being is that this one's not going to do anything until one of these other 2 trigger. This one, I can actually do my best to stay out of the flank situation for the monster, and this one over here is only going to trigger if we're not moving around. So if we get pinned in position, paralyzed, and actually, as part of the monster, it can throw a paralyzing spore card at us that stops us from being able to move, which would then cause that to eventually trigger, and of course that would then trip this one. So you might be thinking, well, right now, why don't we toss this one? Well, if we do, we're bringing in a red card, which we know for sure, based on the fact we're trying to attack, is going to trigger, because the second we go ahead and place a red card in our sequence, we'll have to deal with it. So this pattern of 3 right now is actually better than swapping anything out. We've reached end of turn, time to discard the sequence into the discard pile. We have 2 cards for the first time in the game, so the order in which we put these in the discard pile does matter. You're doing it in the order played. So we put this one in first, so this is the first one to get discarded. The second one will be this one right here. Now, earlier I might have actually stated it in the reverse order, but that's how it is done. On top of the 2 cards that I already had, which was this one here and this one here, these are the 3 new ones that I just pulled up. Now the monster turns toward the aggro player, which is Karah, and she's already in front of him. Any end of turn abilities now trigger. We don't have any, but we do now move to the end of round because both characters have now gone fully, and this is going to trigger this peril card. It says at the end of the round, each threatened player takes a paralyzing spore card from the reserve and places it on the top of the discard pile. So this is what I was talking about. It's a nasty card that can come from basically being threatened, that threatened token, which we avoided by doing lots of movement. But here's a look at what it looks like. Essentially, it says while this card is in your hand, because essentially it goes into your discard pile and eventually filters back into your hand, and when it's sitting in there, you cannot move. And at the end of your action phase, you can discard the card from your hand. So it's going to paralyze you, which makes perfect sense. And as you know, paralyzing in this situation is pretty bad, especially when certain behavior cards are going to trigger based on being in certain sectors. So you really don't want this in your deck because, well, 2 reasons. 1, it could trigger off a behavior card. 2, it's just gumming up your hand of cards for useful things. That'll do it for round number 1. Most of the explanations around how things flow and operate are out of the way at this point. We'll be moving through things at a quicker pace, so round 2 is where we're headed. Now, just before we move the end of round marker to round number 2, I should have removed the stun token off the behavior card here. There's no gameplay impact, but there is a number of things to check for at this point in time to ensure things are squared away for the upcoming round. And speaking of that, we got some start of round effects. We know this one, it's going to be throwing some damage on us unless we reveal a yellow card. Good thing, both characters have a yellow card each, so no damage getting through. Let's do a behavior refresh. We're getting rid of the lowest card, which is this one right here, and this one coming in. The monster's also going to gain struggle 2 because we're controlling 2 characters, so we're going to go ahead and flip this from a 1 to a 3. The character with the aggro token right now then takes the first player marker for this round. Let's trigger our start of turn abilities here. Look at the top 2 cards of the deck. Let's see what we have. We have Cut Through, and the next one is Returning Blade. Is actually a pretty cool one. We'll go ahead and place them back in the same order just so we know what is there. It's very handy to have that from the Crystal Helm. And then below, if we have 3 of the same color, do we? We don't. We're just 1 shy of that. I think heading up north where we can potentially get some healing in that sector in the future would be a good idea. Let's go ahead and use our stamina token here to pay for that point of movement. Now let's head into Karah's action phase. The first card in the sequence is going to be Piercing Strike, which would be a free if we actually were chaining it. In other words, it was following a green card inside of our sequence, but it's not. So it's going to cost me 1 stamina, so I'll go ahead and discard this card here, Shadow Strike, for its stamina, putting this in the discard. So now we can go ahead and take advantage of the attack. It says you may immediately overrun the monster. This Piercing Strike is going to be boosted by the counter on the Voltage card here. So not only do we get the 3, we also get +4 damage for each counter on this card. And right now this is going to get removed. So we get a total of 7 damage. 7 damage plus the 4 already there is a total of 11. Take away 8 for the toughness value. We got 1 wound and 3 remaining. Now this is an interesting situation because we have multiple triggers occurring at the same time. We have the trigger here on the stance card says when we hit 7 health, we're moving to stance number 2. The stance card takes precedence over the behavior card, which is going to trigger as well for using a red attack card. We'll change out the stance card first, which is going to move to stance number 2. It's now become a little bit tougher to deal with Pazis, as you can see here, up to 5 toughness, which means we need 10 damage to get additional wounds on this thing. It says, when revealed, shuffle the aerial invasion into the behavior deck. So we have this set off to the side as is instructed to do in the special instructions for this monster for the expedition mode. So we're going to take this card right now. We're going to take it and shuffle it into this deck right here. So first off, we shuffled the aerial invasion card into this deck. The next thing we did here for the peril card is bring in stage 2's peril card, which is a permanent one, which will stay in for the rest of the game. This is when a player becomes threatened, they suffer damage from this card, which is a 1 still. But then the unleash, which can come from the struggle tokens, getting up to their maximum of 6, will have the aggro player searching their discard pile for paralyzing spore card and placing it on the top of their deck. A new card coming in for stance number 2. This one's permanent as well. It says when this monster would flee, and the flee is going to be based on the card we just shuffled in the behavior deck, players may collectively reveal 1 blue card or maneuver card each for each character from their hands. If they do, the game continues normally. Otherwise, this monster is going to flee and the players immediately lose the scenario. So we risk potentially losing it just from the monster running away. And the next stance, which is stance number 3, will trigger when we get to the 4th wound on the track. Now we go to the behavior card, which needed to trigger based on me using a red attack card. It's called Enchanting Colors. It says each threatened player suffers damage unless they reveal 3 cards of the same color from their hand. Good news, nobody's threatened, so we don't have to worry about this. New behavior card is in. If a player starts in the front sector of the monster, this middle one's going to trigger. So now we have one that'll trigger if you're in the flank when you start, and the other one here is when you're in the front. It's going to be a lot tougher to do hits without triggering those. We're going to have to go to the rear of this monster. Now getting back to this attack card that was played, we can choose to immediately overrun the monster. If we do, the benefit there is we get to place another counter on this card, which is definitely what I want to do. So we're going to overrun because it'll also allow us to be able to get our mastery, because this will tick to 2, which is going to happen right now. I'm going to overrun by hopping over from the position I'm in to the opposite side, and this mastery is now complete. It states here, Piercing Dash. It says when you overrun a monster, deal your base weapon damage or draw a card. That sounds pretty awesome. So we'll have her leave this sector to the other sector on the opposite side. I'm going to go ahead and play this card into my sequence, Crescent Strike. This one is an aggro one. Doesn't matter because I already have the aggro token. But this one has a chain on it, and it says if the card coming before it in the sequence is red, this stamina cost, when it's a chain, is free. So I don't have to pay anything for it. It goes in for absolutely free, which is awesome. It's an attack. It's going to be a base of 3, and it's going to be able to deplete the counter, which is on this Voltage, in order to get another 4 for a total of 7. And then on top of that, the fact that it's the second position in the sequence means it triggers this one down here because we have 2 of these same icons for an additional 3 damage. A whopping 10 damage being thrown at the monster, including the 3, which is already here. So 13 total damage here, and a toughness of 5. Now it stands 2, means 10 damage necessary to get a wound. So we exchange 10 in, keeping 3 here like we have. 1 wound going up there. Not bad at all. No behavioral reactions from this too, which is a huge plus. Now, for those that are unsure, the sequence limit is by default 5, but certain cards will actually tell you get to increase it. So this one right here in my sequence tells me I can increase the sequence limit by 1, meaning I can have up to 6 cards during this turn in my sequence. Well, I'm playing another card in here that's going to mess with that even more. This one here costs 1 stamina. I'll use the final card that I have in hand here for the stamina down here of 1 to pay for that card, and it's called Dancing. It's an aggro one. Again, I already have the aggro token, so it doesn't matter. It says draw 1 for each of these symbols that you have. So I get to draw 3 cards right now. It says the maximum is 3, which is why I strategized to have this pan out the way I did. It's also working nicely because it's starting to follow the trajectory of this battle dance down here to potentially get a 5 damage boost if I can get 1 more of these over here. Now right here, the mastery triggers, which I have here saying increase your sequence limit by 1 again. So now we have a sequence limit of 7. This is why this game is so much fun, because so many different combinations and triggers occur while you're going through your turn. You can see how your sequence of just a limit of 5 can be limiting, but as cards come out, you can increase that. And of course, the more cards being drawn into your hand and the more you can put into your sequence, the nastier combinations of cards you can throw at the monster. From the deck, here are the 3 cards that I've drawn. We got Cut Through, Crossover, and Returning Blade. Next up, I'm going to use this one here called Returning Blade. This one costs 0 stamina. It's an attack card, which is awesome, in the 4th position with the same icon across, meaning that this down here is going to give me a benefit of 5 damage going with this attack. So we've already got on here 3, 5, it's going to be 8 total damage, which is pretty awesome. Now it says down here reclaim. You might be wondering what that means. Essentially, if it states here, the condition is that we have 3 of these symbols in a row, which we certainly do here in the sequence, that allows me to go into my discard pile and find another reclaim keyword card and bring it into my hand. But I've already gone through to look in my discard pile and there isn't one, so I can't take advantage of it. But that's a cool keyword that comes as part of this Feather expansion, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty awesome. My mistake, it actually comes as part of the Mount Havoc expansion, which is where these characters come from. 8 damage from the Returning Blade, plus the 3 that's already here is a total of 11. We need 10 to get another wound, so we'll just keep 1 around like so, and drop it to 5. And we are officially at the halfway mark of this monster's health. Heading back to her turn, she's got 2 cards in hand, which I can use and certainly will be in a second here. We've got 4 in the sequence. Normally the default maximum is 5, but because of these cards in here, the mastery bonus there, plus this one here, additionally, it's going to be 7 that we can place up in the sequence right now. So I want to keep pushing to see if I can get another bonus run off of this down here for the Battle Dance. So what I'm going to do is place Cut Through. This one is going to cost 1 stamina. I'm going to discard the last card I have in my hand for the stamina to pay for that card to be there. And it says you may immediately overrun the monster. So we're going to hop to the opposite side of the monster because I'm going to go ahead and do it. Basically placing her back in that healing sector on the north side of the monster. And when I do, I get to draw a card. Now the reason why this is really cool is because it's building out that sequence of the same symbols. But on top of it, I get another card, which I don't know what it'll be just yet. We're going to find out in a second. But even cooler, the mastery is ready to go. When you overrun the monster, you deal your base weapon damage or you can draw a card. I'll certainly do the damage. The base damage of my weapon is 3, so simply placing 3 on here for a total of 4. We still need 6 to get another wound. And that was all possible because she chose to overrun with the blue card, jumping her over to the north sector. And in turn, this is going to charge up the Voltage card here, which is going to give it a nice +4 damage in the future. And I'm now resolving the draw for the Cut Through card over here, and I got Shadow Step. It's a reclaim, 2 red cards. It says you may immediately move without paying any stamina cost. Now, I don't really think I'll use this, but I actually can't use it. I can't even get it into my sequence because I don't have any stamina to pay for it to be there. So I'm just going to hold on to this, and unfortunately, ending my turn off in this way means I'm not getting a stamina token as I don't have at least 2 cards in hand. Let's now check attrition for the active players, see whether we're getting some damage coming our way from the monster, and we are. We don't even have a single dodge card in our sequence. The monster hits us back, and in terms of the total health we have a total of 10, and we've got 1 hit, so 9 to go before we're KO'd. Sequence cards are going to be all discarded in the order that they were played. We're drawing up to a total of 5 cards. We had this one here to end out the action phase. We got these 4 when I drew up. The good news is that we're inside of a sector that's going to give us some healing on a future turn, but as of right now, this monster is turning towards the aggro character, so it's heading north. We now look for any end of turn effects we need to trigger. We currently don't have any we have to worry about, and we're not done the round yet because Heleren still needs to go, and unfortunately, she's now going to be standing in a sector which is on the flank of the monster, which is going to become problematic for her turn. But for now, we're going to end off part number 1 halfway through this round and come back and jump right into Heleren's turn and see what she can do to press towards stance number 3. We need to get down to 4 wounds to press this monster into stance 3, and we also have to start worrying about the fact that this monster could flee, and even though we're doing really good on the damage side of the equation, this monster has tricks up his sleeve to try and get away from us and get out of this equation, and we want to try to avoid that and take it down. Join me in the next episode as we dive into the finale to see whether we pull it off. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about what you saw. And as always, keep on rolling solo.